Thank you very much. I had the wonderful opportunity to work on this subject of Picasso and Africa when I was asked to curate a show. It is really the moment when diplomacy can is at his best. It was a moment when Jacques Chirac and Thabo Mbeki met each other, and they said, so we have to do something, the two countries, a cultural something. And so they said, well, why not a show? And why not a show on Picasso? And so I've been asked as a curator at the Picasso Museum to curate the show. And I said, okay, but I don't want to make such just an exhibition when we would say, oh, look at how great we are. We have so many Picasso, and Picasso is such a wonderful artist. And I wanted to curate something more close to this country that would welcome the show. And so we decided to work on Picasso and Africa. And so try to make this connection between African art and Picasso true. And I chose as well to work with a colleague, a curator, a South African curator. Her name was Laurence Madeline, and she's very important in my life, so I wanted to make a little tribute to her because she helped me to live a wonderful experience. So this is the only photo I get from the show. This is a part in Johannesburg. It was the Standard Bank Gallery who hosted the exhibition because the museum in Johannesburg was not secure, safe enough to get it. And you can see at the first place some African objects. These are objects that didn't belong to Picasso, but that I chose among different South African collections, because it's not that, and we are going to see that Picasso had a very important collection of African art, but I wanted to show some examples of works he could know, he could collect, in order to bring more Picasso works to the continent, the Africa continent. So now let's begin to talk about Picasso and Africa. And just to remember that he's not a very easy and simple artist. You will see, he said in 1922, I quote in French, "L'art nègre connaît pas." It means that Negro art, it was the word that was used at this period, I don't know. And, but at the same time, he said that he knew, in fact, very well African art, just like we are going to see. And he said as well, I make a translation, my biggest artistical emotions, I felt them when I discovered the sublime beauty of the sculpture executed by anonymous artists, and it is an important, he's considered that the artists, the African artists, anonymous, were artists of Africa. These works of religious art, passionate and logical, are what the human imagination produced of the most powerful and the most beautiful ever. First, Picasso was a collector of African art. His collection began certainly around 1907, and he was at this moment in 1906, 1907, he discovered through Picasso, through Matisse, the first masks, and they were considered at this moment not like art, but as curiosity. And he began to collect some of them, And here you have Picasso in his first studio in Bateau-Lavoir. And so it is before 1909. And you can see some Melanesian sculptures. And it was not, he had African art as well. Here it is his second studio. And you have on the left a little sculpture, which is in fact this one that has been, I don't know why, I can't understand, cut. And it is a not good one for what we call for colon, a head of woman that he had at this moment. And all the people who visited Picasso at this period tell how he was surrounded by these objects. And it was really, as you can see, here this is one of his friends, Paul Haviland, in a chair, and you have a painting that was given by Matisse, some guitar, it was just like that, and you have this small mask that stayed in his collection and which is now at the Musée Picasso in Paris. He collected as well a lot of postcards by Edmond Fortier that show African people, and they were very important. I think that he collected them around 1909 because it is a moment when he sent postcards to Gertrude Stein and Braque with this photo by Fortier. Another one. He had a lot of this. This is another view of another studio a little later, Rue Schœlcher, and you have La Palette, you have some Cubist works, and you have an African mask. And here, Olga, his wife, it is another studio. It is a moment when Picasso, you know, there is the Africa period, the Negro period that was called, and at this moment it was quite over. And he married Olga, who was a Russian, and he began a very bourgeois bohemian life, meeting a lot of people of the high society, going to parties and so on. And you see that at this moment, when he began to change his life, African art is still there, with the two figures on the floor on the left. And these are the figures. And they were bought by Gertrude Stein and given to Picasso. In fact, sold to Picasso. This is a drawing that shows still the same studio and house in Montrouge in 1917, when you have people around the table. It was a very special moment in Picasso's life. He began to be wealthy. He really changed he didn't meet the same people. And here you have a Grébeau mask on the wall on the right. Here it is. It belonged to Picasso. And this is really what we could call the moment before when everybody in Paris will be touched by Negro and Negro art, and it will be the beginning of the 20s with La Revue Nègre, with everybody that wanted to have, and especially the people of the highest societies who wanted to have African art and ancient art, and they wanted to mix everything. And Picasso was the first in this period to do that. This is a picture of the god of iron and war from Dahomey, and this is a picture he asked to his friend Michel Léris. It is later, it is in at the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s. And he always kept this picture of this war, and you know how Michel Léris was important. He made a very huge travel with Marcel Griaule through Africa, and especially in the Mali, collected objects, and Picasso gave money for this mission through Africa, and he was there when Michel Léris told about this travel. And he was there as well when the African intellectuals wanted to make the Africa present with this first congrès of writers and black artists, Présence africaine, and he gave the drawing for the poster and for the book and for the invitation. It was in 1956, and it shows that he always kept this in mind. And for Aimé Césaire as well, but I couldn't find any drawing left. He agreed to make a monument in Fort-de-France as a tribute to the slavery. And it was a request by Aimé Césaire, and he said yes, but at the end, it was not possible to collect the money, or I don't know, there is not the monument. But it means that during the years and through the decennies, he was able to move from this first curiosity, admiration, and then knowing a little better and better what was really Africa. This is the collection of Picasso after his death. It is in La Villa La Californie that he didn't live there anymore since a long time. And most of the sculptures just kept like that. It just means that it was always in his head. He kept just few masks around him, but that they lost a little their power for him. But it is a moment when he wanted to give them not to the Louvre, but to the Musée de l'Homme. And the Musée de l'Homme is very, very important because it is certainly the moment he had his epiphany, his revelation of African art. So now we are going to see a little what he had, something like 100 objects from Africa. It was, you know, the relation, the very strange relation between France and Africa at the moment, and it was very easy to find African art in Marseille or in France or in Paris because all the people, the French people that went there, came back with some sculptures, masks, and so on, and were ready to sell them very easily. So this is his Grebo, his Baga. We already saw it. Another one. Another one. And I just put the objects because you will find some influences in his works. A baoulé, a horse, and some figures from these people. Once again, there are things which are very important, you will see, and I just want to notice, the way the figures are, and all the little things that were added, just like the necklace. Another Grebo, very important, which is at the Musée Picasso in Paris. A fun one, Galois, Cotta, he had several of them, Pounou, Sakou, Mbandi. This is a friend of mine who made a catalogue of Picasso's African collection, and it was edited by Prestel, I think. His name is, it will come back. We prepared this part of the show together. This is the head we already saw. A Congo one, very important, you will see. Something for the puppet in Mali, and it is a Sogo, a Pounou. This is the one that we see in the studio. It should be in the other sense, but I was unable to do this with Benin. So the meeting between Picasso and African was already prepared as soon as Picasso arrived in Paris. This is one of the first drawings he did when he settled really in Paris. And you see the both thing, a Parisian figure with the Eiffel Tower, and then these drawings, which are as well inspired by Gauguin. Paul Gauguin was the first to really show an interest for exotic art, and it was Oceanian art. And Picasso was very interested with Gauguin. He, of course, never met him, but he was very close to Gauguin's friend Paco Durieux. And in 1906, there was a big exhibition of Gauguin's work. And Picasso, it was his first step to this kind of extra-European art. And in 1907, something happened very important. He already saw a mask, an African mask that Matisse bought in 1906, but the most important moment, I have to find it. It was a visit he made of the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, and he said that it was really the moment when it changed his art. And there was two important moments in this discovery. It was first the art, and second, the magical power. He really talked about something like superstition that he felt when he discovered these works in the Musée de l'Homme, and he added that it was an awful museum with a lot of dust and completely forgotten, and but it has been the most important moment in his life. And he was working on this very famous painting, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, that he began the Demoiselles d'Avignon because he wanted to be the most modern artist in Paris. He just painted and achieved a painting which name was Les Saltimbanques, and now it is in Washington, and he felt he was too classical. And during months, he just stayed in his studio, painting in the night, and we see that the revelation of the mask completely changed his painting on the right side of the painting. And so he began to reconsider all the figures with this, for example, I'm sorry, I don't speak English very well, the lines on the face, and the big eyes, sometimes completely empty, and the nose, the way it is done. This is in Picasso Museum in Paris, and it was really deeply inspired by the mask he discovered. This is a done one. And this is a Picasso's mask. He did it in 1907. It is kept in my former museum in La Réunion. I like it very much. And you see the way the nose just goes not completely seen like this. These are the kind of masks he saw. Everybody in the very beginning of the 1910 collected masks in the artists, Matisse, Vlaminck, Derain. They were completely crazy with masks. Kahnweiler, who was the Picasso art dealer, collected as well. And you see how important was the changement in his art when he discovered everything is in this year 1907. And for example, these are the quota, and you see the way he keeps it in mind. The mask and the African art allowed Picasso to go further in the sculpture. I show you the mask. And so this is a figure, it is in the Thyssen collection, the collection Thyssen in Madrid. This wonderful figure. This is a little drawing for an antelope, and these are completely inspired by the Bambara objects. This is a bagal, and you see that through African art, he goes to the sculpture and make a lot of drawings for project of sculptures and the sculptures as well. And even his painting became more sculptural with the simplification of the forms. This is a drawing that could be a drawing of a sculpture. And you can make some, you can see the influence of a Dogon, for example, another one. This is not a Picasso, but these are drawings by Picasso, inspired by African art and some projects for sculptures. He was very, very concerned with the sculpture at the moment, as you can see. So the volume was one of the things he learned from African art. And I show you this Grebo because you have the way the eye are just two points of wood and wooden points. And, you know, the guitar is really inspired by the Grebo mask, the way what was high becomes low, and the opposite. This is 1912, another one. The Baoulé and the Como were here when he was preparing the costume for, oh my God, I know it. So the name of the friend who made the catalogue of African collection of Picasso is Peter Stepan. Here it comes. And I guess that later the Parade, it is the costume for Parade, and you see that the mask for the horse is very close to the Baouli we just saw. So I already talked about simplification. This is a mask by Picasso, just a flat and holes to figure the eye and the nose. And the mask and this simplification, the white, the black will just will stay in his painting. There is something here which is very important. It is always a simplification, the way the things, the Cubist period is over, but he always keeps, and there is a wonderful anecdote that was collected by his first mistress, who was Fernande Olivier. And she said that once a friend of them, it was very early, it was before 1909, came and showed a photo that he had from Africa. And he showed this guy, whose name was Denecker, shows the photo to an African person in Africa, and this African guy could not understand what was the photo about. He said, "This is me." And he said, "But it can't be you. I'm going to show you who you are." So he made a drawing with a head, legs, and arms, and he added the buttons of his jacket. But he didn't put the buttons on the jacket, but just around the figure. And Picasso was very enthusiastic with this idea of that to figure the jacket and the buttons, it was not necessary to put them on the jacket. But if they were around, they were as important as well, or perhaps more important. So this is a way to display the shapes, not exactly in the classical Occidental way of doing. And here we have this series of wonderful paintings. It is a moment when he's quite close to the surrealists. And this simplification goes very far. And I found them here and everywhere. There are two important motifs. The mouth, which is in the other, and that comes from certain African sculptures of women when you have the sex, which is shown like this, and he had very long conversation about l'excision with Michel Léris. He was very fascinated with this practice, and perhaps this is something that you can see here. And the nails. In this period, he uses a lot of nails. For example, in this kind of painting, and sometimes he just put some, there is another thing that is important in the relation between Africa and Picasso. It is the uses of elements from the real life. And for example, the nails, sometimes he just take a canvas and some nails and put it on the canvas, and it is a painting. And the nail is a motif that comes from the Congo, for example. We can have some recalling of this important ad in his paintings here. So this is a portrait of his, I don't know how much, mistress, Marie-Thérèse, in the early 30s. And you can see that he still had, even in this very classical, it is a moment, the beginning of the 1930s, when he came back to a kind of classicism. And this is something that is very interesting, and well, and I will go back at this moment on this idea later. So it is a moment when he is very classical, but even through the classical way, you can find the background. The iron, the use of iron will be very important, and through African experience, you can see Bozo here, and we already talked about this god. And this is Jean Cocteau, who called Picasso un bricoleur ou un chiffonnier. The chiffonnier is the guy who goes everywhere and picks everything and sells very, very little things. Now it's a very, and the way that Picasso with nothing does something very, very wonderful. And with the iron, the African art helped Picasso to create new forms, new uses. Here, this is a head. You have some drawings later. And here, this is a head of a woman. And just like this idea to collect and to keep everything and transform it, you have here, I don't know the name in English. It is when you, la passoire, which is used here as a motif for the head. This is something that comes as well from African art, just like the way the mouth is not like this, it is projected outside. Like here is from the front. And it goes very, very far with the bases in the 50s. They are now at the Picasso Museum. And the most important thing is certainly the magical power. You know that Picasso was from Spain, and he said, for example, that Georges Braque, who collected African art, who was his friend in the discovery of the Cubism, he said that Braque could not be as strong as he was because he was not frightened by African sculptures. He said that he was completely frightened by the power of the African fetish, and he said that if Braque was not as strong as he was, it was because he could not understand this power of the African art. And here, this is, I think, one of the moments when Picasso is really fascinated, and when you find this something very close to, you have the horns here, and here, with the way of making, just like if it was some little rites or some rites, the way he make, it doesn't exist anymore, but he asked to Brassailles to shoot this kind of works he did. And this one exists. You see as well the same way of using some daily life objects. and to reuse them and doing some, for example, we know that because he was very superstitious, Picasso, he collected, for example, nails. When he cut his nails, he was very careful not to let them anywhere because he was afraid that someone would use them. He never, when he had to go and get a haircut, he was very careful in the choice of his of the freezer. What is the name? The hairdresser, because he was frightened of. He was very superstitious. And here you have something just like a right that he could practice, and he added some little feather, red feather, as perhaps just like as a place of the heart. And he had this kind of thing, he knew them, and he was very fascinated, and he felt that it was something really special. And he had this Congo with the nails and the rope and so on. So he said that, this is, excuse me, if you just let me some minutes, I would like to read you, even if it is French, I will try to do a translation. Where is it? Okay, it is here. It is he said, one always talk about the influence of Negroes on my work. What can I do? We loved the fetish, just like Van Gogh said, l'art japonais, on avait tout ça en commun. It means that the revolution of African art is as important as the revolution of the discovery of Japanese prints for people like Gauguin, Toulouse-Lautrec, and Van Gogh. We collected the Negroes. Their forms had more influence on me than on Matisse or on Derain. But for them, the mask, because for them, the mask was just sculptures like any other sculptures. But when I went to the Trocadero, it was the place where the Musée de l'Homme was, it was disgusting. He called it the flea market. It was just like the flea market. The smell was awful. I was on my own, and I just wanted to go out. I said nothing. I just stayed there, and I understood what was important. Something was happening to me. The masks, they were not sculptures like others, not at all. They were magical things. We didn't realize that they were magic, and I said that Negroes were, I don't know if you will understand the word, intercessors. Mm-hmm. And I knew this word, I learned this word this day, intercessors. It was really important for him. It was intercessors to prevent from everything, against unknown spirits and threatened spirits. I always looked at the fetish. Je regardais toujours les fétiches. I understood as well that I am against everything. I think as well that everything that is not known is an enemy. Everything. The women, the children, the beasts, everything. But I understood that the sculptures for Negroes were the way to understand the world. Well, and then he said that Negro artists were Cubists, but the Cubists didn't exist, so it was not easy to say that they were Cubists. And so you understand and so he says, alone in this awful museum and with the masks, with some dolls and dusty dolls, les demoiselles d'Avignon arrived. They arrived this very day. and at this very place of the Musée du Trocadéro. And it was my first big canvas of exorcism. This is exactly what he recalled and what he reported to André Malraux. So this is 1907, and we already talked about the Demoiselle d'Avignon. And here, to put a little end to my little discussion, I just wanted to say that just before I curated Picasso and Africa, I curated a show on Picasso and Ingres. And everything I can say on Picasso and Ingres, I could say as well and on Picasso and Africa, except the superstition and the magic. It means that even if Picasso, and it is the way he hides himself behind this mask, can recognize that there is a very big influence of Negro art, there are a lot of things in Picasso's work, and he is a continent by himself. And so that's it. Of course, if you have some questions, and because I don't speak so well, my English was not good enough to make me understood, I'm ready to answer to your questions.
Again, we'd like to thank the presenter for a very engaging topic. Let's give her a big round of applause again. Thank you very much. At this particular time, again, we would like to engage. I mean, I know you've been touched by certain things that she brought to the forefront, those of you who knew about it or those who didn't. So we would open the stage now for questions, contributions. Again, if you do have a question, just say, this is my question. If you do have a comment, then say, this is my comment. But I think she's done very well speaking bilingual to be able to bring the essential things forward. I congratulate you for speaking in a language which I know is not your home, your main indigenous language, but at least you did do excellent in bringing it forward. So again, we take questions if you do have questions at this particular time.
Yes, hello. I just have a question. When you showed pictures, then there was a name on the top always, and I didn't know if it was the type of sculpture that you presented or the actual name.
It was mostly the name of the people where yeah.
Okay.
Baul, yeah.
Okay.
I just took all the provenance from the catalogue that Peter Stepan did of the African collection of Picasso.
And the second part of my question was then if it was the names, then you talked about anonymous artists.
Yeah.
So did he have also anonymous works from anonymous artists?
In fact, it is a people, so you don't know exactly who made the sculpture. We just know that it comes from these people or this other one or from this country. And at this moment, it was unclear. And for example, the first Negro fetish that Picasso bought, and I said Gauguin because it was from something from Oceania. It was his first Negro. They were at the very beginning of the 20th century. People didn't really make a difference between a Melanesian sculpture or an African one. And even in Africa, to know from Congo, Mali, Benin, and so on, it was not known at all.
Thank you very much for your lecture. I missed a little bit of the beginning, so I don't know if you discussed this already, but how is this change in his art accepted by his followers or people who enjoyed his art? Did they accept it? Were they frightened? Or?
What is really amazing with Picasso is that, well, for the Demoiselle d'Avignon, we know that it was not shown until 1918. It was just kept in his studio. People went visit Picasso and saw, and for example, I think it is in 1908 or 1909, there was Burgess, who was an American writer who visited Picasso's, and he published the first picture of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon with a big title, Savage Painters in Paris, something like that. So at the very beginning of the Demoiselles d'Avignon, people really realized that it was a savage art. But it happened that in 1907, 1908, Picasso met Daniel Kahnweiler, who became his art dealer, and he had no more trouble with Monet. So he didn't mind, it didn't matter if he was successful or not at the moment. But what happened is that with the Cubist, that he didn't, you know, we can know that works were rejected when they were presented in the big official exhibitions. This is Picasso. This is something that Picasso didn't, he didn't want to send his works at the official exhibitions. He just kept them with him and gave them to Kahnweiler and had his few collectors. So we can't say that there was a reject of this work. In fact, there was no shock. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'd just like to make a little recommendation. In the middle of the 60s, a few very famous black actors in Hollywood produced a series called Black History, Lost, Stolen, or Strayed. And in that series, they talked about Picasso, they talked about the European artists and the fact that they had been influenced by African art. And so I think it would be a good thing for people here to like maybe see that series and look at it from that point of view. That's all I want to say.
It happens that there is something absolutely amazing, is that Picasso had such an influence in American art. He had a very important show that were traveling in the United States when the Second World War began. And so it was not possible for the works to come back in Europe. So they just travel around in America. And so all the artists could see. And it acted that they discovered African art through Picasso's work until that Alfred Barr curated a huge show with African art. It was in the 30s, so it was very important, and Picasso and the dealers of Picasso were present. And then after, it was the work of Rubin, and it had a big influence. And when you see, for example, the works by Basquiat, you can see how much he was influenced by both African, but mostly Picasso work.
Good evening. Thank you for
Bonsoir.
your presentation. Yeah. I'd just like to know what message he was trying to communicate, the consistency, and what exactly was he trying to convey through all these various artwork?
Me? No.
Picasso, yeah.
Picasso, what message? I think that the first message was, and I can't find it because I have, this is my anthology. I collected a lot of things, but the first one was how to put an end to, it was since the mid-19th century, the purpose for the artists were to put an end to the classical way of painting. So the first revolution with Courbet, and then after the Impressionists, and then Gauguin, and then Van Gogh, and everybody was just like murdering this old-fashioned painting. And Picasso put this murder or this exorcism to the very end, because he just thanks to Africa. He had these two. This is the reason why I put the Bantu, the Turkish bath at the end, because he was in the two, there was a balance between his adoration for classical art and the way he wanted at the same time to kill it, to do something new. He had the same love for the two kind of art, but he needed to kill one in order to find himself, being the biggest artist in the 20th century. So this is what he did, thanks to African art. It gives this strength, and he gave him this power to do this and to become Picasso.
Hello. Is it working? Okay. Just to add, I think, wasn't it also the case, for instance, Kirchner in Germany also was painting this style of African art like Picasso did, that they, at that time, modern art came up on in the same way the colonialism was going down, declining, and that the artists wanted to break through the at that time established view of the public to arts, and to break through to make a breakthrough for the so-called primitivism.
Yeah, sure. The fact that when he says that it was anonymous artist, he recognized in front of him artists. It means not anonymous people of a very far and colonial thing and so on. He really rated the anonymous artist of this fact of being artists. And he was, I think that he really followed the end of the colonial era, being friend with Michel Leiris, being close, not so close to Griot, or being very close to Senghor, to Aimé Césaire. He's someone that he was very involved in political questions after the 40s. So he was not at the first line, but he was able to understand what was happening and to give a hand when he had little time to do. I think that considering an African, he didn't know who, just like an artist, meant that he recognized these people being able to do great things. So this is so important. I don't know if I really understand and answer your question, because I didn't really understood the beginning. I'm sorry.
Well, the beginning was just that many artists of that time, beside Picasso, wanted to break through the public looking on so-called primitive art and primitivism on the whole.
Yeah.
And that was going along with the decline of the colonialism. That was one point. And the other point, which I didn't mention yet, was that according to the show of Anne Baldessari, Picasso in photography, he used a lot of photos.
I'm sorry, but I can't agree with her theory, because
okay.
I show the Edmond Fortier, but I think, in fact, that he didn't have the photos when he painted the Demoiselles d'Avignon. I think that he had them 2 years later. I can't remember. I'm not working at the Picasso Museum anymore, so for the moment I am with Gauguin and Van Gogh, so it is a little far. But I do remember, because I was dealing with Picasso's archives, and I published, for example, 2 postcards he sent to Braque, another one to Kahnweiler, and another one to Gertrude Stein. I think it is in 1909 or 1910. So it means that he would have kept from 1907 to, and this is something, he was not someone who just, I do remember this postcard, I'm going to, and so I don't really agree with her. But the fact is that even it is not, the photo just gave some types that you can find in the sculpture. If it is this or this or this, there is this idea of the type that the postcards show. So chronologically, I can't really agree with this, but it is something that is very close. There's no doubt.
This is something I'm totally surprised now by, and the photo of the African woman you showed before, you showed the Demoiselle d'Avignon. I thought, according to that show of Baldassari, that he was following that picture. If this is wrong, this would be very interesting.
We know, but I don't feel very comfortable because she's a colleague of mine. And well, but the fact is that they were published in 1907, and that he used them to write to his friend later. And the way it's just, but perhaps I'm wrong, perhaps, but working very close to Picasso's papers and archives, when he's someone who just put this. So I can't just imagine that he went in 1907 to find a postcard and send it 2 or 3 years later.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. What I like to do at this particular time to help out, if you may, I know there's a lot of interest in here, especially with the last questions that have come. So if you can take, and we'll take 3 questions at a time, you can make notes, and maybe what you're explaining might answer 2 questions in one go, so it'll be efficient if that's okay with you. Okay. Blanca?
Thank you very much. How can the work of Picasso help African artists today to improve in their works?
Could you repeat slow?
How can the work which Picasso did help African artists today to improve in their works?
If you may, what we'll do is we'll take the 3.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the first one. How can it help?
I have to remember it. I have a very short memory.
Oh, okay. And working on that, then let's take it one at a time. Not because you have a short memory, but because I want you to be much more efficient. Okay. So we'll take it one at a time.
Okay. So what I can say is, please try to read the essay of Marilyn Martin. This is the lady who was the co-curator of the show Picasso and Africa, because she is really a wonderful specialist of African art, and she just studies the way that she answers this question. And I'm not really able tonight to give you a good answer, but you will find all the story in this essay by Marilyn Martin. Sorry.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. It reminded me, as a school teacher, how much enjoyment children really get from the exploration of African art, and furthermore Picasso. And a comment, really, a recommendation that we don't forget how artwork can be supported by commentary, but also how our commentaries can be supported by artwork, so we don't lose messages. And we support them with artwork, and how artwork can support our messages when we are explaining things.
Well, more than a question, I would like to have a comment. Thank you so much. We've been talking all this week about mainly economic challenges of this continent. We've been talking about political issues. So during this, the last 5 days, we've been really exploring a lot of different topics. So I think it's a beautiful way of ending such an intense, well, tomorrow we still have 2 more lectures, but it's a really beautiful way to look at the relations between Europe and Africa through art and through Picasso's art. Touches me especially as I'm Spanish. So, I'm really proud that we have a little input of Spanish culture also in this.
I'm sure that it is, and this is what Gertrude Stein, my dear love Gertrude Stein, always write. It is because he was Spanish that he was able to feel this thrill and to go and to have this communication with African art. And it is something, for example, he had, and there is a poem by Apollinaire who says something quite close to. He belonged with the Fetish, a big Christ, Spanish one, with true nails and with true hair, something very powerful. This kind of power he could find in the Fetish. And if you just allow me to try to find this wonderful poem by Apollinaire, it is in Zone. Where is it? He makes this thing clear that it was. Where is it? Oh, I like it so much. In French first. Tu marches vers Auteuil, tu veux aller chez toi à pied, dormir parmi tes fétiches d'Océanie et de Guinée. Ils sont des Christs d'une autre forme et d'une autre croyance. Ce sont des Christs inférieurs des obscures espérances. It means that you walk to Auteuil, it is a neighbor in Paris. You want to go back home, to sleep among the fetish from Oceania and from Guinea. They are Christs of another form and of another believing. They are Christs of obscure, I don't know what is the word, hope. Yeah, exactly. So he makes this parallelism between the believing in Spain, very strong, and the unknown believing in Africa. So the Spain is very important in this.
Could you maybe also tell us a little bit more about the experience in the Africa and Picasso exhibition in South Africa? I believe it was in 2006.
Yeah.
Could you maybe comment a little bit more of the impact of this exhibition? I believe it was the second exhibition of Picasso in the continent. The first one was in Senegal, because Senghor was a very good friend of Picasso, and he insisted very much to do this. It was a little exhibition, though, in Senegal.
Yeah, a very small one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
with mostly posters, in fact.
Mm-hmm. So maybe could you comment a little bit on the impact of such a developing society in South Africa now of this exhibition?
There were not so many visitors, but they made a lot of my colleagues from South Africa made a huge and wonderful job in order that people and young people mostly from everywhere, townships and everywhere, come and visit. So it had a very big impact on scholars and on children and so on, because they were driven to the show, and there was special books published for them and so on. I think that there were not so many visitors, but there was a big, well, I don't know, perhaps I should not say that, but there was a very big pride in Africa to have this show. In the same time, there was a little bitterness, because the works, it was work that they were not, how can I say, that the works of Picasso were not in Africa. It was just a special show, and that all these things that were taken and not with all the recognition they could wait for, because it was. And I had people made me, and it was very strange for me. It has been very well welcome, and I really enjoyed it. It was a wonderful experience. And the two things that really surprised me and make me think that everything was not so well understood and so on, it is that first, I wrote anonymous or artist unknown on the labels of the works, of course, because we don't know, but we put the name of the people. And so they said, why didn't you write the name of the artist? It's because I can't, I don't know, I have no idea. So this was, and they had the feeling that the show was a show for European people. And I don't know how to do a show for Africa, because I was a European curator, so it was not so well understood. But it has been really wonderful, and but this is a success. We had far more visitors in this show in Africa than in India. The 2 years before the show in South Africa, there was this kind of diplomatic show in India of Picasso, and it didn't work at all. Nobody came. And Picasso in Africa was far more successful, even if it was not the crowd I hoped.
Just one more comment. It's becoming increasingly more clear to me that if I look at his most famous, Picasso's most famous painting, Guernica,
yeah,
that I just see this African influence. I just, if I look at I think there's if I'm not mistaken, there's a cow or steer that's yeah, and and it just becomes so evident, and that doesn't detract from Picasso, because everyone is like influenced. I'm sure that perhaps some of these African artists were probably influenced by cave art, so it's always a good thing to be influenced by somebody or something, but it just seemed to me that in the case of Guernica, of that painting, that I see that influence.
Yeah, but really, this is something perhaps I didn't insist enough, but I put works from, in art history, they say Negro period, but in fact, it would end in 1912 or something. But in fact, during all his life, he went back to African art with different way and doing different things. And regarding Guernica, the problem is that you can find influence of African art, parietal or cave war art. You are perfectly right, and so many things. So it's the works they come from. He just like he knew everything, and he remembered of everything. So it's very difficult to make the part, but there is African art everywhere, sure.
Referring to your remark that people didn't understand the show as from the perspective of Africa, if you talk to the people then, ask them what was wrong or why they couldn't take it as an African perspective, what kind of answers did you get then? Because I think this is very interesting.
Yeah, it was very, in fact, it was at the very end of the show, and it was at the very last day of my stay in South Africa. I was just, and it was something that it was published in the newspapers. I think that what perhaps it is that this is what I didn't want, but perhaps it was too much. That we have everything. In fact, we had not the African art, because I chose it in African collection, South African collection. But we had all the Picasso, and it was just like what I didn't want at the beginning, but it happened, that we were so rich and go and show how wonderful. Perhaps it was something like that. But I was told I curated a show of a white woman, and of course I'm a white woman, so it was very. I can't say anything.
So they perceived it more like Africa around Picasso, and not Africa influencing.
Not exactly. It was just. I think that it was perhaps a moment, very something I don't know, and it's a little far for me. It's 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm not sure. I just remember this feeling of it was a little hard for me, this term of white woman show. But perhaps it was a moment when it was necessary for intellectual people of South Africa to say through this sentence that they exist, even if I curated the show. And my colleague was very shocked, and far more than I, because she was just like a white woman like me, and she was a South African one, and so on. And perhaps it was something necessary to say that it was very well that the show was there, but that they were able to do things as wonderful as this show, I guess.
If I may ask two questions then. One, you did describe that somewhere Picasso had this internal struggle in himself between the classical arts, and you virtually framed it as he murdering one to bring another to find himself. And we know with all creative geniuses or creative individuals, what they bring outside is actually a projection of what is inside them. So the first question would be, if the beauty and the aesthetic value and the excellence of classical art did not relate to Picasso, what was it in the African expression that he felt was much more comfortable in identifying in himself? And is that then projected even to this day in 2010, where others see Picasso's work in its originality as still something of value, that African essence, as also finding themselves? The second one, which I would have to chuckle a little on that one, is in learning and moving forward, and it's a difficult question to ask, but I still have to ask. Since you are an authority, just if you may pardon me, not in a patronizing, but you do know your work. If the first project, as you intended for all good intentions, they said that, well, you presented it to Africa as one of European heritage. I will not use as a white woman, but one of European heritage. What would you do if you had to do, suppose I invited you again to Africa to present something as impactful as this, being the authority? What would you do different to be able to let it have some appeal or some impact with your target African heritage audience?
I'm afraid I would do the same because really in this show I had this opportunity, and I know how much it is difficult because I'm curating other shows, and here I'm curating a show and it's very difficult to get the loads. And I had all the works of the Picasso Museum, and I could accept the very fragile and so on and so on. It was possible for me to send them in South Africa. It's something really huge, and it was such, I was very happy that thanks to this show, Peter Stepan was able to make this first step in the really good knowledge of African collection, Picasso's African collection. So in my way, I think that I really did the best. And after, I don't know exactly what, because we had this, we made a symposium when people could talk just like we are doing tonight. We had Marilyn Martin, who is really recognized for her knowledge of African art in the 20th and more century. I don't know exactly because I can't really understand your question. I don't know exactly.
Okay, I'll help you out.
Yeah, I know that you know what I should have done.
Since the context of this particular conference is the rise of Africa, and it's either two directions you can go, either rising or falling. Then you've presented, and definitely you have done a great job in bringing it. So how would you then be able to share, and in the reference as art makes a statement and statements make art, how would your presentation help in the context of helping Africa or the African mind to find strength, to rise, rather than to seeing it and seeing an inferiority and leave and going in the opposite direction. So how does your delivery of Picasso in Africa help in the rise of the African mind?
It was a question? Yes. Okay. I give up. No, with all, I don't really understand the question. I'm sorry. It's not my.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll try it one more time. But if it doesn't work, at least it's a dialogue.
Let me answer for
Help.
Hello. I think very simply placed, it is continuing to show the inspiration, the global inspiration that African art has, and it can be drawn upon to continue to inspire the creativity in peoples of different nationalities, different ethnicities around the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question. On some of his art, it seems he's really pushing the edges and creativity. And I just wondered, did he have any experience or exposure to hallucinogenic drugs or anything? And I'm not saying that to be, because many artists during that period did. And it influenced their work or caused them to go to some edges. And I'm just asking, did he?
There is no trouble to answer this question because he, at this moment, this precise moment, 1906 or something, he experienced hashish, and he just couldn't stand the effect. He had the feeling that he was losing himself. So it was certainly, and this is what he said, the first and the last time he used drugs, because he just couldn't bear the way he felt and the feeling not to be Picasso and himself anymore. And if you, and this is something, because I had this wonderful position to deal with Picasso's archives, and you can see for all his lifelong, because just like he kept, when he went to the restaurants, we can know what he ate, because he kept everything. So you can see that he was just like, he didn't drink, no wine, just water. And he had very, very few, and always wanted to stay someone who had his head, and it was really what he always had in mind, to be able to work. So Ashish's experience just frightened him because he thought he would not able to work anymore, that he would not able to become himself after. And so he just stopped. This is what was important for him, was to be safe, healthy, and really able to work.
Well, thank you very much, Ade. I think at this particular time, and I really appreciate you, one of the presenters who we virtually extended our dialogue with you. So if you may, at this particular time, again, let's give our presenter a big round of applause. And at this particular time, I'd like to hand it over to the director and founder, Mr. Mark Dumfries, please.
Thank you very much, Shafat. I just wanted also from my side to express my gratitude to you for coming all the way to Berlin for this occasion. You had a lot of responsibility with this lecture, in the sense you were one of the few speakers in the conference to really touch on this cultural dimension, this artistic dimension. And I think it was really a great example with Picasso to see this bridge between Africa and Europe. And I thought in that sense it was really important that you were here. And I think you've inspired us all. And now we all want to come visit you and see the exhibition. So I think that'll be the next, next part.
I'm in another museum, and the Picasso Museum is closed. So,
right, so we'll have to see then.
You have to delay your experience.
All right, or we can organize another experience in South Africa or beyond, but we're looking forward to it. But thank you also for the visual presentation. So maybe once again, if you could join me in a very, very warm expression of our gratitude. Thank you.